question. I'll take a couple of questions. Perfectly valid also if you want to make a point, but please do it putting your hand up and with a microphone. I think Martin had a question there, and there was somebody at the back.
Isabel Hilton. Just to Peter's point, and Peter's kind of shaken the bogeyman of the American Constitution at us. It's not absolutely, it's really quite unusual to combine executive and ceremonial power, and there are many, many other constitutional models much closer to home, in Germany, for instance, where that doesn't happen. And you write the constitution that you care to write if you're not subject to the 17th century Victorian melodrama as we are. If you have a ceremonial estate, which we largely have, it is about national identity. I personally would rather it wasn't about a kind of Victorian Disneyland version of the nation. And it's probably time that this nation learned to decide what it was. But it doesn't have to be a combination of executive and ceremonial power at all.
So, can you gentlemen, yeah.
Yes, Martin Wright. Yes, the historical examples are fascinating, but I'd be interested to know what the panel thinks about the possibility of us having a poor monarch as the next monarch. What would we do then? And we know a little, despite the exemptions under the Freedom of Information Act that the monarchy enjoys, about the way that Prince Charles interferes. There may be a possibility of the next monarch being a poor monarch, and I would like to hear some opinions about the consequences.
Maybe one more question.
I think that politicians have moved into the square occupied by the king several times in the past few decades. And one of them was the sacking of Gough Whitlam as Prime Minister of the United States of Australia, and that was just going along to the Queen, getting her to sign a piece of paper, and off he went. He was a democratically elected Prime Minister, and he was sacked. And that, I have suspicion that it was on orders of America. The same thing happened regarding the Chagos Islanders under Harold Wilson. They were removed from their homeland, and when the High Court overturned that decision just very recently, Tony Blair, who was Prime Minister at the time, just popped along to the Queen, got her to sign a piece of paper and overturned the High Court decision. And so that is using the residual powers of the monarchy by politicians to overrule everyone who's got a democratic right to anything.
Joan, do you want to take, we've got use and abuse of royal prerogative and the royal politicians moving to the royal space. We've also got what would happen if we had a poor monarch, and then the sense that we need to link somehow a monarchy or our leadership with our current national identity.
Well, first of all, I mean, this is not a popular opinion, but I don't think we do have a very good monarch. And one of the things that's very striking to me is that when you're in a room and you're waiting for the Queen or one of her close family to arrive, people are incredibly nervous because it's a very formal occasion. You're suffocated by protocol, and if you actually don't go along with the protocol, I said last week that when I said hello to the Queen and smiled, she cut me dead, because of course you're supposed to wait until the Queen speaks to you and you're supposed to curtsy, and I didn't do either. And that's a problem, because she is my head of state. I don't actually want her as head of state, but she is my head of state. And as head of state, she actually should be civil to all the citizens, including the ones who like the Republic. So I don't agree that we do have a very good monarch. And I think with Charles, if Charles takes over, from the Republican point of view, I think the prospect of Charles taking over is just fantastic.
But on this specific question about a poor monarch, or a monarch that was not of the kind of social standing of every past royal family, do you think that's something that we would stomach as a nation?
Well, I don't really understand the question, because it suggests that we have a kind of, an unbroken line of really terrific monarchs, and I just don't think that we have.
I think you meant in poverty terms, in kind of wealth terms, or
in the terms that we've already heard about.
Or poor monarch in terms of can't afford Jimmy Shoes. I'd like that. That'd be great.
I meant bad.
A bad monarch, but you don't think that we've had a bad monarch?
Oh, I would agree generally with the kind of consensus position outlined here, which is that we have had some bad monarchs. But what we haven't talked about is what happens in the future of the empire. That's what I think.
Well, may I take that and the Gough Whitlam question together? Because I actually have a whole chapter in my book about
That's the last question.
the Australian constitutional crisis of 1975. And I think it's not, I disagree with you with part of your characterization. The Queen was not involved. Indeed, the Governor General who sacked Whitlam, his private secretary, rang up Buckingham Palace on the Armistice Day, at the height of the Armistice Day crisis, to say, you know, Buckingham Palace, we have a problem. And the switchboard said, do you know what time of night it is? Go away. So the idea of Her Majesty as the ultimate backstop of the Australian Constitution was, I think, rebutted by that. It also shows that using royal prerogative powers to settle a political dispute was totally disastrous in that case. I think you and I are together on that one. And I think in the long run will lead to the end of monarchy in Australia. Now, as to how you get rid of a bad monarch, I think the answer is it's been erratic. As I said in my opening remarks, Parliament and the Executive got rid of Edward VIII, who was a bad monarch. They got rid of him for the wrong reason. Parliament was unable to get rid of George V, who was a more seriously bad monarch in the years between 1910 and 1914, because he was precisely backing the opposition with support from the army and some law professors against the elected government.
Views on how we might get rid of a bad monarch and whether or not we're accurately represented by a current plot?
Yeah, I mean, I think the scale of encroachments that are possible in the future in the type of politics media that we have are not on the scale that there were for Queen Victoria and so on. I think, you know, they're very much in a box. I think everything that Charles has ever done that's interesting, he won't be able to do anymore. And, you know, to some extent it will be about pressure to, you know, just not do. What's interesting is how little they do. I mean, you take the only hung parliament you get for 35 years and the Queen's waiting for a telephone call, isn't she? It's actually Gus O'Donnell running his handbook and so on, the political parties doing it. So because of the symbolism, actually, you have to keep the wisdom and the expertise miles away from the action. So it actually just makes very little difference either way. Whether these handwritten letters, obviously ministers see them kind of straight away. I mean, if they change their minds on the basis of that, then you have to think about ministers. I'm not sure the Queen raised an eyebrow. I mean, the Queen was quite unconstitutional, I think, in her criticisms of Margaret Thatcher over apartheid, South Africa sanctions and the Commonwealth. I mean, you shouldn't have the Queen's views in the Sunday Times newspaper. It was quite a Prince Charles-ish thing to do. I mean, I sympathise slightly with the Queen's position about apartheid, South Africa and the Commonwealth in that case, but it was clearly unconstitutional. It didn't make a bit of difference, did it? A bit of a raised eyebrow from Buckingham Palace to what Margaret Thatcher's position was about South Africa. So, I mean, how would change come about? There'd be kind of pressure through the, you know, through the press, through the media and so on, probably pressure to, you know, have William not Charles. But one reform you could have. It's quite a bad idea that the Queen believes that she was anointed by God to rule and therefore can never abdicate. It would be quite a good idea, I think, for a monarch to make a pledge to the British people to serve them, and therefore perhaps not have, you know, Charles's son perhaps wait until his 95th birthday to take over, and that might be the answer to Martin's question.
Peter, I think you've written before about not necessarily always liking the royal family that we've got.
No, well, I'm a monarchist, I'm not a royalist, and I think that the Glorious Revolution, as I still term it, of 1688 is a perfectly good precedent. If they're no good, you chuck them out and find another one. The important thing being that you find another one, because in 1688 we all knew perfectly well what happened when you got rid of them altogether, which was lawless rule by major generals. And people didn't like that and decided they didn't want it again. And perhaps the experience has sunk too far in the national memory for people to realize just exactly what you play with when you start sort of messing around with the deep parts of the Constitution. But there's no reason why you shouldn't get rid of them if they don't perform. I've got criticisms of the Windsors, plenty of them. I think King George VI was completely wrong in his treatment of Neville Chamberlain after Munich. The adulatory welcome and the placing of him on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, to be illuminated by the only anti-aircraft searchlights then in existence in London as he took the applause of the crowd. So that, I also criticise very strongly the way in which the Queen intervened on behalf of the national surrender to the Irish Republican Army in 1998 and endorsed it. So there are many points at which the Windsors have exceeded their power. They weren't necessarily enough to say, let's get rid of them. Mistakes can be and will be made. The question is if they're consistently enough made, whether you can get rid of them. Yes, you can. We got rid of Edward VIII because he was no good. The fact that the reason for getting rid of him, the substantive reason for getting rid of him, was not maybe satisfactory to some people, but it turned out to be a good decision. I don't think that's an argument against monarchy. How do you get rid of the president? How long did it take to get rid of Richard Nixon? When he turned out to be.
You got rid of Charles I as well.
Sorry?
Yes.
Got rid of Charles
I'm waiting for someone to mention that.
A lawless show trial. You're in favour of those? Have you examined that trial? Are you in favour of trials not based on law in which there's no presumption of innocence? In that case,
No, I'm
great.
I'm not.
I'm the other way.
There are a number of questions, so I think we've got time for a last round.